Welcome to the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Green, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change. All right. Good morning, everybody. I have the great pleasure to be sitting here with Devin Coogan. Devin is in Madison, Wisconsin, my former home, and I'm here in Boulder, Colorado. And Devin is a cool guy that I have met in various capacities in the meditation space, through some somatic work, somatic experiencing, and the bodywork communities in Madison, Wisconsin. And we've had a chance to connect and talk story on a number of occasions and compare notes. And so we'll be sitting down with Devin to hear about his work as a psychotherapist using somatic experiencing, internal family systems, the way mindfulness and his Buddhist training shows up in his work, among other topics to be determined. But just briefly, Devin is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in Madison, Wisconsin, and he's an artist. I've seen his woodblock prints and similar things online. I might be asking about that a little bit. Yeah, that's the basics of it. Devin, thanks for sitting down today.
Thanks for having me, Alex. And I should say, by way of gratitude to start, that Alex, you've had a big impact in Madison. You're the one who brought the first somatic experiencing training here that I ended up going to, and I think about that. It's like
along with Jenny Hayes. Yeah, Jenny
Hayes.
Right. We came back from, we did the training in St. Paul, and and I think we finished around 2017. And then a year went by and we thought, geez, this is good. But it'd be nice to have more colleagues. So let's see if we can recruit a trainer. And so we did. So that was the launch of that.
It's beautiful. And now it's the second iteration. It's like,
right. That's right.
You're on a forest out here. So
totally. Yeah. And some of the folks I work with at the Redbeard team in Madison, 2 of them are in this round of training. So no, it's definitely growing and proliferating.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear sort of your whole story and including,
sure.
including those points of intersection. Yeah, well, I always kind of begin with kind of an origin story question, and the theme of this podcast is embodiment work, and I define that very broadly. To me, the brain and the mind and mind body, it's all in there, in my view. So I'm just a little bit curious about, just some of your influences, because I know obviously you were drawn to psychotherapy and drawn to somatic components of that as your career has gone on. I know of you as a seasoned meditator and Buddhist practitioner, and how that feeds in. And there's probably other things. And so if you'd be willing to kind of go back and down memory lane, and
sure.
just share a little bit about some of the things that kind of guided you towards this work that you're doing these days.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's a true origin story, I grew up in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that, there's kind of like healers, artisans, mystics in the water there. It's just that kind of place. And so I can't deny that, like, that was probably on some level in the background. You go to the grocery store, you see 15 different flyers for people. And anyway, so I grew up in Santa Fe, and then I went to college out in San Francisco, and that's kind of a similar place in some ways, and studied philosophy. And philosophy was really interesting, in terms of like a way of looking at the mind and working with thoughts. That was all there.
Yeah.
But it was incredible. It's basically like training in criticality and deconstruction, which was not supportive of mental health for myself. And not what
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw,
Yeah.
in the field, kind of.
Wait, I have to stop you. I have
Yeah,
to know
yeah.
what you mean. I was a philosophy major too, and so that I
No
didn't know
shit.
that. I didn't know
Wow.
that about you.
Yeah.
No, I want to hear what you're saying about not supportive of
Well,
mental health. Yeah.
well, yeah. Maybe I'm putting it a little
No, I
strongly. But
totally believe you. I believe you. I just want to understand. Yeah.
it's just like basically, it seemed to me like you're learning how to deconstruct everything, that's how the field seemed to me. Whenever this was 2005.
Sure.
So academics are criticizing each other's work, and they're breaking down kind of like everything all up to postmodernism. It's like, wow, what is the real like practice here? Or, it's pretty groundless at the end. And
Totally.
yeah.
Yep.
So it was a journey that I needed to take, that was important for me to take in terms of how it shook out, because
Right.
what it did was I became interested in Buddhist philosophy and took a religious studies service learning course that, the professor was really rigorous philosophically, but also you had to do service learning. So I went to San Francisco Zen Center and Green Gulch Farm. And that was the first time I got a taste of like, oh, something's happening here. Like there was a nun I remember this nun at Green Gulch Farm. We were having, beet soup after working in the farm, and she just had a sparkle in her eye and was asking questions, just engaging in a way that was new, and different, particularly compared to like, philosophy courses at a university. It was so different, and just generally, so that planted a seed.
Can I wouldn't normally do this, but I have so much resonance. Can I just share with you what
Yes,
something
please.
I have in common with that?
Yeah.
Which is which I so resonate with that, and I also haven't thought about it in a long time. But for me, my starting in Zen training was pretty similar. I was in my philosophy training, and like that was really interesting for me, and kind of what's the mind. But I ended up kind of, as we got into postmodernism and Derrida and Foucault, and I just started feeling like everything was discombobulating, and there was good things about it, because there was like a erasing of a lot of my just foundational assumptions about myself, the world, the universe.
Yeah.
But it was so destabilizing in other ways, and reading more of those texts was not like anchoring me in a sense of purpose, or like, how do I navigate in this world? And not dissimilarly for me, it was in Hawaii, but I connected to the Zen community out there, and there was and for me there was a sense of, I saw something there in how the people lived and acted, and actually their embodiment as well. And for me that was it was like, okay, that maybe is where I move next. So I didn't know that piece of your story, and so I hear you.
I didn't know that of you, of yours either. I'd be curious to hear some other time, more folk, Alex Green rendition of all the twists and turns of that, if you're willing.
Yeah. Well, so that was around, so you were, and I've driven by Green Gulch, beautiful property. I've been to the San Francisco Zen Center only as a visitor, more or less. But so that was in your San Francisco years. Was that your main practice community, or?
It actually it was not. So it turned my head, but to be honest, in the beginning, Zen, I was kind of put off. I ended up going to live at a Zen Center, but at the San Francisco Zen Center, I sat in the Hiroshi seat on accident, and like violated all these forms. And they were very clear that I was screwing up, and I was like, this is a little tight for me. But I ended up going to live at a Zen Center. But in the interim, then I connected with the Theravada, with Spirit Rock, basically. I ended up going to do a young adult retreat at Spirit Rock after a couple years after college, and that really kind of lit a fire for me.
Right. Can I ask a quick question? Because I know Spirit Rock, and is it Jack Kornfield?
Yeah.
and others. I mean, it's a hugely impactful organization. But here's a point of confusion that I hope you can help me with right now. So just kind of how it locates in Buddhism, Theravada. So is it this? There's three terms that I'm not sure if they're the same or not. Theravada, or that style anyway. Insight meditation and Vipassana meditation. Is there overlap between these three, or?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. So Theravada, as far as I understand, refers to the older, kind of original Southeast Asian traditions.
Okay.
And there's the three sort of larger camps in Buddhism: the Theravada, the Mahayana, which is more China, Japan,
and the Hinayana,
or the Vajrayana, the Tibetan.
Oh yeah, right.
And then Vipassana is a term that gets interchanged that kind of means insight, I think. We'd have to look it up, but
okay.
Yeah. And I think the people use Vipassana a lot when talking about Goenka's retreats. And so Goenka's the guy who, free 10-day retreats. He really was popular and helped a lot of people with that style.
Yeah. Okay.
There's probably more there, but that's my
okay. All right. So all right.
Breakdown.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So that lit a fire for you. Keep going on your journey here. Yeah.
So I did the 5-day young adult retreat. And then at the end of that retreat, there were two teachers who you could kind of choose a group if you wanted to, go to this group. And it was a group for encouragement for more intensive or long-term practice. And they were kind of sat us down and said, if you are fired up by this, you should consider longer term practice, that kind of thing. They were monastics they were Westerners, but had trained as monastics in Burma. And so I took them at their word and left that retreat and applied for Spirit Rock's then longest retreat, which is a 2-month silent retreat. And a couple of weeks after that, Spirit Rock called me up and they were like, very kind and sweet, but they were like, have you considered psychotherapy? On the phone. And it was the first time.
You mean receiving psychotherapy or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay. And I was initially kind of insulted, I was like, what are you guys talking about?
Right.
But they were just being wise, and so because I had very little meditation practice and I was trying to do something major, and
right.
I said, why don't you come for the month-long retreat in the spring as a kind of compromise? And I was like, okay, sure. So I did that, and then like 14 days into a silent retreat, I was like, oh, psychotherapy. Oh, there might be something to this.
Do you remember, so I'm hearing the, something, little realization or something. Do you remember what that connection was?
That's a good question. So in the first retreat, I do remember there was a lot of insight around embodiment, like I remember walking across the cafeteria and feeling something like social anxiety. There's all these people, nobody's talking, so you can't get a read on anybody.
Right.
And just having this visceral sense of like, I don't control what other people think, and like feeling my shoulders drop and my body relax. And I had never really, like that, for whatever reason, it's pretty basic, but like that had never occurred to me until I was 21 years old. Like,
right.
And partly it was because I was seeing all my own thoughts in the retreat. And it was like, thoughts are just arising. Like, right, we can work with them and that kind of thing, but I don't control my own thinking. So of course I don't control their thoughts. And it wasn't like I was cognitively trying to get there. It just kind of happened.
That was the realization. Yeah.
And then in the longer retreat, I remember there was a period of time where it felt like I just had a rock in my chest, unprocessed feeling, emotion, whatever was there. A lot of it was not like specific content per se, but just kind of like physical feeling of pain.
Yep.
And that just was like, oh, you can get support around this. So I left that retreat and I saw a flyer, similar to the ones I was kind of referencing in Santa Fe, these old school flyers where they got the number tabs on the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it was Will Kabat-Zinn was starting a psychotherapy practice ends up being John Kabat-Zinn's son. And so I didn't know that at the time. I just ripped a number for him, called him up, told him I just did a month long. He was in San Francisco. Can we, meet? Guy blew my mind, like, with therapy.
Wait, for therapy. So okay.
He's
so John Kabat-Zinn's son is a therapist. Okay. And that's
very low profile therapist. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. And and it blew your mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so I would go to so then that's how mental health sort of therapy came on the map for me. And I think, it wasn't like he was doing any specific kind of intervention, but he was also trained as a monastic, and it was just clear that he had a lot of compassion and understanding and presence, and had faced his own stuff really thoroughly. That came through to me. And I don't think a ton of that is projection. Just knowing
that was your read.
Yeah.
How long were you doing that work with him?
Not for super long, it's probably 5 months, something like that. And then I decided I wanted it. I mean, I was broke, so I was just going whenever I could at the time. Then I decided to go live at Upaya, to leave San Francisco and go live at Upaya. And
that is, which part of New Mexico is Upaya in?
Santa Fe, right in Santa Fe.
It's in Santa Fe. Okay. Yeah.
So I ended that, but I was really grateful to him, and I really lucked out. It's been actually hard as a therapist, for a while, of comparing myself to that standard, and it's just on another level. So,
it's good. But it's good to have those standards, isn't it?
Sure. Fair.
You know what I mean? Some of those reference people. That makes a big difference, I think. Yeah.
So then I went to go live at Upaya. And, like I said in the beginning, I was not particularly drawn to Zen. It just so happened Upaya was literally next to a parking lot that I used to hang out at with my friends in high school. And I didn't know there was a Zen Center there. I got into Buddhism, and then I was like, oh, there's a Zen Center. Oh, it's right next to Cerro Gordo Park. So then my room, when I first moved there, looked out at the parking lot.
At the parking lot that you used to hang out in? Yeah.
Yes.
Only doing wholesome activities, I'm sure.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah,
Right.
Exploring altered states in a different way.
Yeah, that's right. Different form of meditation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Friendship is important,
Yeah, indeed.
How in all of its forms. So I went to live there, and had some aversion at first to Zen and the forms of Zen. It's quite rigorous, as even this is a Soto tradition. So
sure.
You're Rinzai?
Rinzai, yeah.
So even easy, softer than Rinzai, but it ended up being really good for me. It was like a corrective, it was not the loosey-goosey art world, it was you show up on time. There's really it was very firm boundaries and precision. And I grew to love it. And I also grew to love liturgy in Zen, which was not as present in the especially the Western convert spirit rock tradition.
Right. Wait, is the liturgy, do you mean, are you talking about chanting? Is that what you're talking about?
Chanting and every morning.
Yep. That was a deep practice for me as well. The Okyo is what we called it in our tradition. And totally agree. Yep.
And just to say, when later learning SE and all that, it was clear how helpful, using your voice in the morning, moving your
Yeah, totally. You can look at those practices through a somatic lens, and maybe I'll bookmark that as something to come back to, because there's some thought. I have some thoughts around that.
Okay.
Some questions and thoughts. So anyway, okay, cool. So how long were you there at Upaya?
I was there about 11 months or so as a resident, did lay ordination. And then I was around in town for a year after that, just doing sesshin and stuff, but no longer lived there.
Yeah. And then was Madison next? Did you come to Madison for grad school, or was that what brought you, or what was that story?
That's right. Yeah. So actually, Upaya Roshi Joan is titan and invites like Richie Davidson and, you know, Evan Thompson and all that crew out every year for, you know, Zen, contemplative neuroscience, you know,
Mm,
colloquium, you know, like kind of a retreat. And that, like,
sure.
and then I met them, and, you know, Richie's like a really amazing guy. I mean, obviously, but also as a, you just get a sense of his presence, like when you're
Oh,
there.
yeah. Yeah.
So that put it on the map, and then I applied to, you know, come out to Madison. It seemed like a place where mental health and contemplative practice was being integrated, at least at a research level. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
and then the rest is history. You know, now I'm out in Madison.
How many years now in Madison?
10.
Decade. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
It's wild.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if you could, so, you know, in a minute we'll get to SE and IFS and some of the things we have some common background in, but even just in your, you know, so I'm hearing the major influence of the meditation,
Yeah.
and this, you know, kind of pivotal exposure to psychotherapy in very meaningful, impactful way for you. What was, I don't know exactly what the right question to ask is, but I guess I'm just curious about, like, in your, you know, at a certain point you became clear you wanted to pursue that as a profession.
Mm.
What gave you that clarity? So
Yeah.
that was going, you know, a good avocation.
Yeah. Excuse me. Honestly, it was like, excuse me. I was thinking about graduate school, and I remember this moment. I was on a late night drive. I was coming back from Colorado down to New Mexico, and I was considering like shifting towards like figuring out an environmental focus. Like, where do my skills line up with what the world needs, and you know, what I want to offer professionally? How do I make this work? Kind of.
Right.
And I just felt at the time like it's like, and this is the Buddhist influence for sure, but like the problems in the world are being generated by our mind. Like, it seems like the mind is really the primary location where this is stemming from.
Sure.
You know, how exactly psychotherapy fits into that now, I'm not sure, but it was like the point of curiosity was clear of like,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
I mean, I should say how psychotherapy fits into the resolution of
Right.
problems. Well, I guess we could talk about that, but
Yep.
at the
So
time, that was the point of clarity.
that was the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
just like thinking at night, late while driving, and it kind of started to flow from there. You know, and I had the positive experience with Will, and
Yeah.
then, you know, practices of working with the mind through Buddhism and
Right.
secular. You know, it's like, so I was
Yeah.
really curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so leaping forward in time to you know, 10 years, I guess, till today, you know, because I think, you know, you've been working for different organizations. You started a private practice this year. Tell us a little bit about the theme of your practice. Who do you work with psychotherapy? You know, we'll talk about the modalities and stuff, but yeah, how do you broadcast your services? Or yeah, who do you, who's the right person to come find their way to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I work with adults. I'm not trained to work with children. So adults, kind of general mental health. You know, and I don't have it. It's not that specific. You know, there's some primary mental health. There's some substance use.
Yep.
And I have some training in both of those. And
Yeah.
people who are interested in the modalities, sometimes that's like a stronger fit, but not, you know, it also can be quite open. Somebody you think, you know, like
Yeah.
it just really depends on the meeting the person, getting to know each other. And frankly, like, you know, I wish I had a better advertisement piece, but
well, I mean, what I'm hearing is, you know, I mean, I guess I'll just speak for myself personally. You know, there's all this advice, you know, for practice around, you know, in the coaching world and therapy. You know, there's all this stuff around creating a niche and this and that, and it's probably good advice. But speaking for myself personally, I've really sort of resisted that impulse. I think some of it is just my personality, but I guess I'm too interested in the broadness of human experience, and on the one hand, that includes figuring something out. Sometimes that includes overcoming grief and suffering. Sometimes that includes, deepening the connection, regulation in the nervous system, or feeling more aliveness. I sometimes think there's overcoming negative states is sort of one theme, but then there's also sort of like growth and living into something,
Totally.
more alive as another theme.
Yes.
So I don't know if you resonate with that at all.
Absolutely.
But it's sounding to me like, yeah, you don't want to reduce the lens of what you're working with.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for putting it into words. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I've thought a lot about that.
It's good. It's good.
Well, on your Psychology Today profile, you sort of list your things, and you use the term person-centered therapy, which I've seen a lot. But what does that mean? Just for anyone listening who maybe doesn't understand what that's connoting, what's meant by that.
Well, person-centered therapy, I think it first started with Carl Rogers. He was a humanistic person-centered therapist, and one of his major contributions was that unconditional positive regard, and kind of like following a thread, more of an open stance and less of a directive, protocolized. Not that that's always excluded, but yeah. And so it's a recognition that people are interpersonally oriented, and it's helpful to share and express with another person there, to be a compassionate presence, witness, support, coach, various roles.
Yeah. I see. Yeah. Relationship as exactly. Primary. Yep. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I knew about Rogerian work and the, unconditional positive regard, and I'm glad that that's filtered into various contexts, because that's a good principle to bring into a therapeutic relationship. I think it's a little scary that that's missing that somebody had to invent that.
That's true. That's a good. I mean,
I sort of sometimes I think back to the 1950s and 30s, and people's with a therapist there with their with a clipboard, and
I take notes, so that's still me, but
yeah, okay, that's still you. Okay, but
I have to take notes.
But hopefully you're at least, well, I guess I'm sure
my heart doesn't have
your heart is there, and the unconditional positive regard is there. I'm sure your clients feel that. But but I sometimes think these early analytic days, and I shudder a little bit about the lack of relationship there. Yeah.
So that's
interesting.
What that's coming from or referencing.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, can you, so I know of at least somatic experiencing and internal family systems, probably mindfulness principles, probably other stuff too. I know you have a background with the EMDR and et cetera. But could we talk about, I guess let's talk about somatic experiencing, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What you were, already, well into your therapy career. What made you think, okay, this is a piece. What has that brought into your work what is that brought in that maybe wasn't there as much previously?
Oh, it's been so helpful. And I think I first heard about it from the Spirit Rock community. Like the people in the meditation community, the teachers were started talking about titration, and orienting, working with emotion in the body, feeling in the body. And I had already, like I shared with the retreat practice, where it's like you do a retreat, and sometimes it's just like, wow, I just have this somatic response. And in the early days of when I was doing it, I'm sure before that, there was not a lot of way. It was just kind of continue to be aware.
Sit through it and hope it changes. Yeah.
Exactly. And permanence is the primary kind of.
Right.
And so I had just got really excited about it. I'm forgetting exactly what the question was. Sorry.
I am too. SE. I guess like no. What it has brought, what it's brought to your practice. Well, but just a quick comment, because when you were saying earlier about the meditation retreat, and you were mentioning that the pain and the heaviness and the rock on. I can't remember the phrase you used, and I was thinking to myself, like that's kind of like exactly the kind of thing that SE is good for. It's like, okay, there's a sensation, there's a physical, and how to unpack that both in a physical way, how to get some movement or change, but then also like, what may be behind that? Is that that grief? Is that freeze immobilization? Is that what is it exactly? And I kind of think it as SE as being a good framework for that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I guess, since we both do SE, let's just sort of jam out about the attributes of somatic experiencing. So yeah, what else? I guess, the question I had asked is what it's brought into your practice that wasn't as much there before. Yeah,
well, I think for me, SIBAM is incredibly helpful in terms of organizing what's happening in human experience and working with it,
Right. Could you stop and define that just for people who don't know what that is?
SIBAM, so sensations, images, behavior, affect, meaning, and working within all of those realms, right? And it kind of makes a space for a lot of other modalities too. Like with meaning, it's can include cognitions like cognitive therapy. So it's not like we're excluding any of that, right?
Right.
But if somebody, like for example, studying philosophy was like primarily cognitive at the time, and there was too much meaning channel, and like then the sensation channel came online through meditation practice, and then it's like including affect, and so it's like a way of like what's happening here, how do we organize it, what might be helpful like for a person in a given moment,
right? Totally. And I love that. I mean, SIBAM, and I love the term channel because it's a good way to look at it. It's like that there's these multiple, domains of our experience, and we might be really aware of one channel, like you said, you studied philosophy and you're strong in your meaning channel, but then some other, that was kind of my story too. I was maybe kind of strong in the meaning channel, strong through meditation, martial arts, sensation channel, became aware. But then probably one of the slowest ones for me was the affect channel. I knew there was emotion, sort of, but it wasn't all that clear about, well, what is that? Not only what am I feeling from a sensation perspective, but like, is that a touch of sadness? Is that loss? Is that frustration? Like that took me some time to develop that channel. And so anyway, I'm just resonating. Yeah.
So I love that, and then, the notion of pendulation was really helpful, particularly coming out of the meditative tradition where the instruction was basically like, just stay aware of it. That was an instruction I would get on long retreats, like just kind of bring your attention. The pain is good because it's easy to be aware of. And then it was much later, and I think it was Will Kabat-Zinn. It was like, well, what about moving your attention out of that? I was like, wow, I just spent 7 days looking straight at it.
Totally.
And that was not very helpful.
Okay. All right. Define that term, and then let's talk about it. So pendulation, key principle of somatic experiencing. So, and I mean, we're getting a hint of it, but how would you describe that to a client? What is pendulation?
Yeah. So moving the attention into something distressing or painful or aversive, and then actually kind of consciously moving the attention out of it to something pleasant or orienting or neutral, easeful. And building that in,
and to me, I mean, pendulation, key idea. And to me, it sort of works on two levels. There's like, on the mind side, there's a lot of, there's the, so-called negativity bias. It's easier to pay attention to threats and pains. And so, many of us at least are, easy to pay attention to the bad. And so there's this value in what else is there to notice? And so, which, is a bit of a mental shift. Like, like when we, in SC, we ask client, we start, if we're going to ask about sensation, I don't know about you, but the way I was trained is like, hey, and what are you noticing in your body that feels grounded, that feels pleasant, that feels safe? As a starting point. Now, I'm also curious. I'm also curious about what feels not so good, but it's sort of like how to carry the both and. But
yes,
but another piece of pendulation that I've come to, and I've only started to appreciate it as I've gone longer into practicing SE, is, in my view, pendulating between things like, where you're directing your attention to sensation. Now you're organically going into some orientation. There's an invitation of movement. There might be breath. But even by pendulating between different modes, stillness, movement, breathfulness, quieter breath, internal awareness, external awareness. My view, or what I've come to understand, is that by introducing this shifting around, then there's somehow that creates movement in the overall system. It's like the overall autonomic system can start to flow because there's not this fixedness in one domain. I don't know if that matches your experience.
It's just occurring to me in a new way as you describe it that way, of how it's kind of also a contradiction is maybe too strong of a word, but like a shift out of a kind of freeze pattern in and of itself, of like, how do we get things flowing? Let's actually like move a little bit,
Yep.
Building that in. Yeah. So I like that. Let's see what else. I mean, there's so much in SE.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what other major SE.
The red and the blue is really similar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, similar. Red being vortex and counter vortex, or activation and resource. When you're with new clients and you're kind of bringing them into the SE vocabulary, how do you explain red and blue?
I just use red and blue, and I'll describe, like, if somebody is having an experience, because sometimes it can feel, it's such a good concept for describing how, when you try to feel, like, let's say with loving kindness practice and meditation, right? You're trying to connect to a feeling of warmth, and what comes up is like irritation, agitation, even things like hatred, and it's like, what it's like, and then people feel like something's wrong with me. It's like, no, this is what happens. Right. You go into blue and some red comes up, like blue and then red and then blue and then red, and you're doing it just right. It's just how our system works, is that it's brings up the counterpoint. It's, in a way.
And then the converse can maybe, I mean, that you're right. It's like you go in, you start with the blue, or, let's say you go ask some sort of resourcing question, like, what's one of the, best loving relationships that you can remember, that's kind of like a common attachment oriented. And then they remember that, but then the flip side of it, the pain of not getting that in some other domain, or not getting enough of that, comes right to the surface as well. And so that's kind of the red and the blue showing up. And then, to me, I'm always interested in the opposite way, which, again, with the negativity bias, especially, like, let's say we're working on some kind of trauma, something happened and it was scary and there was definitely some bad things. And so now part of an SE, we're hearing that story, but we're slowing it down, and we're listening. But part of our role is, in any story, often there's just these little bullet points where there's even a little bit of blue. Somebody said something. Somebody was there, and somehow pausing and noticing the blue, even in these very painful situations, oftentimes is a very pivotal. Can create a big shift in the processing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you have a way you describe it to folks? Like,
probably, I don't know. I think I would use it like, you mean blue and red specifically? I'd be very simplistic. I would just say, I think of blue as is the more things like pleasure or expansiveness, things that we want more of, sensations or feelings that feel good. And red sort of refers more to activation or stress, or quote unquote negative sensations, or that would be how I language it.
Yeah,
I think
lovely.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, super cool. What else about SE? Do you one thing that I'm interested with therapists is, because, I come into this work as a body worker first, and with touch training, and SE has a touch component. Doesn't mean it's, some people do a lot of that, some people less. I'm curious for you as a therapist, how was the touch element of SE training for you? Is that part of your style, or how do you hold that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just finished the last module. They teach in SE, they teach touch and advanced 2, which is the last of all of the 3-year training. And I liked it a lot, and I haven't included it in therapy yet, and I'm not sure how I'll do that. I know people who are doing it. I do include self-touch, the soothing touch out of the mindful self-compassion, a hand on the back of the hand, or a hand on the forearm, or a hand on the heart. Just having people feel like, what that's like, even hand on the cheek. I think that can be super helpful. I include that a lot. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
It would be interesting to and I'll have to take some time to think about how to include it, and when, and maybe pick your brain about it. But
well, it's interesting because people sort of consult with me sometimes, about that. And the funny thing is that I still do body work, and I do touch therapy, and I the tracking the nervous system, and the all of that is always there when I'm doing any sort of touch work. But when I'm doing SE, it's very rare that I use touch in it, for whatever reason. Like you, I lean on self-touch a lot, just like you said, noticing where does it feel good, even the own person's contact, and what I saw a lot of in the SE training is where the therapist would, not only lying down table work, but seated work, sometimes the therapist offers touch that might feel support. And I can see the place for that. But it just is not, it has never been my style. It's easier. I don't know. So that's the irony, is I'm a body worker, but I use very little touch, when I do SE. So, what else about SE is cool, or unique? There's there's sort of the discharge component, right? So sometimes funny. When we're working with what were you thinking about that?
Well, just somebody the other day I used that word in session, and they were like, discharge. And I'm like, yeah, it's a jargon word, but they were making fun of me for it. So. Anyway.
Totally. Well, we're full of jargon words. It's hard to know. Now I don't even know what's jargon anymore.
So that's why I was laughing, because I just used that. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. Well, so, there's that piece of it. And in discharge, I guess, would refer to, it could be anything from emoting, but it can include trembling, the yawning that we see, these sort of embodied responses is a key thing in SE, because even though we might be looking at something emotional or, a traumatic memory, part of our main interest is, can we get a shift and a change at the level of the physiology? And sometimes those kinds of discharges is a big piece of it. And I'm guessing that's, I'm not as familiar with EMDR, but I'm assuming that's shows up there in a
Absolutely.
maybe not a dissimilar way. But what's your thought about that sort of that releasing side? Or if you don't want to use discharge, you tell me what word to use instead of discharge.
Well, I don't have a better word. I'm in the same boat, and I actually I appreciated it being named as something, because
Uh-huh.
it takes the self-consciousness or shame or fear out of it, of like, whoa, my temperature is changing. It's like, oh, good. Like, this is something called
Right.
discharge, of like, your system is processing, like,
Right. These working signs that
yeah,
something valuable is happening.
yeah,
Or
taking,
stomach gurgling, all those kinds of things.
exactly.
Yeah.
Even shaking, like with, TRE or something like that. Oh, it's an energy
Right.
discharging. It's something we so commonly inhibit, and like, oh, it's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it feels like a thumbs up to an experience that's really important to affirm.
Yeah, I think that's right. That idea of it. Yeah, I mean, it's because it's not just, oh, that's fine. It's incidental. It's it's more than that. It's thumbs up.
Mm.
It's great. It's highlighting and affirming that's, and I'll often say, when we get into that mode, it's like, we can set the conversation down. The conversation
Yeah,
becomes secondary. That, the where the action's at is in the physiology at that stage.
right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow. um well, what if we broaden the conversation to bring in parts work, kind of through the internal family systems lens.
Sure.
um I'd love to hear your story about that, like kind of what attracted you into that model, what resonates with you about that approach. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. It started to just become, kind of show up more on the map, people mentioning it. I had a therapist friend, Andrew Archer, who was going out to see Dick Schwartz and talking about it. And then I heard that I read Internal Family Systems second edition. It's a very boring title, but it's an excellent book.
Hmm.
Um, and was just really, really impressed. And then heard that he was also including, like, I love that it's non-pathologizing and views the human person as basically good.
Right.
Um, and that he was trying to find a way, or for whatever reason had found a way, to kind of grok sense of self with like Buddhist understanding of self too.
Right.
And that was mind blowing to me. It was like, wow, somebody in
Yeah.
the Western psychotherapeutic community is viewing this as a agent of healing and wanting to, like, be in conversation about it and bring it in. Not just Buddhists, like
Right. Or
ecumenical
a
spirituality.
Jungian approach, or yeah,
Yeah,
it's that's totally, no, I
yeah,
fully resonate there. Um, Ling, I love the non-pathologizing piece too. It's easy for when I do this work. It's, I'm not trained as a psychotherapist, so I don't know
mm,
diagnoses.
mm,
The DSM-5, all of that. So but explain that non-pathologizing perspective, just because I think that's an important
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Well, it's recognizing that, so as, like, let's say, like with addiction, the old school model is people basically kind of getting shamed about a behavior.
Okay.
What are you doing? It's a pathologizing approach. Like, this person, dot, dot, dot,
Right.
shouldn't be doing it. There's some kind of
You
way.
have a sickness, you have a syndrome,
Yeah,
you have a problem.
exactly.
Okay.
And in the IFS approach, or parts work approach, it's like there's a part of you that's engaging in something for a reason, and
Uh-huh.
you're like an ecosystem. And at some point, that was the most intelligent response and
Mm,
had a functionality to it.
mm,
And viewing that with even some appreciation and respect for the part that's engaging in that behavior. Like, of course
mm,
you're doing that, like,
mm.
there's a reason for it.
Right.
And not
Right.
trying to, so that's that.
That's the shift. Yeah.
That's the shift, and there
Yeah.
was a lot of that in the history of mental health.
Yeah. 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 I think that's an
Yeah.
important, like we were talking about the evolution towards a person's, person center, that relationship is important. And, to me, this is part of it too. This,
Mm.
there's probably other non-pathologizing models.
Mm.
Like I think of, I studied a little bit with Larry Heller, NARM,
Oh yeah,
neuroaffective,
yeah.
and and then, like, that carries in there, and and
Mm.
SE definitely carries in that perspective. But I think IFS, does a nice job, because like you say, there's this sort of, like, for any so-called negative, whether it's a behavior like an addiction, or whether it's a tendency to criticize ourselves,
Yeah.
or whether it's I don't know, shutting, people pleasing behavior. It's like, part of the concept in IFS is to, like, slow down, take a look, and try to sort of understand, well, it assumes that there's a logic behind that. There's some reason. Now, there may be some value in shifting. It may relate to something that made sense a while ago, maybe when you were young, and it may not make as much sense today, but that doesn't mean it's a problem or a pathology. It's a strategy that had a lot of value, or else why would you be continuing to do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so self capital, and when I did a recording a few months back with our colleague and friend Bob Gillespie, and
Cool.
talked about that too. Just sort of that. How does that to me, there's something pretty radical. It sounds like you agree, but there's something kind of radical about positing, that the capital S self, that something that we all is the foundational element of our self as a being, as a human, and that there's enormous healing potential from that. Can you speak to it? Maybe for somebody who hasn't heard too much about that principle from IFS. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's profound in a way, but the basic introduction is the qualities of self, of looking through the qualities of, when you're they're the aspect, calm, compassion, curiosity, confidence. They use the C words, and
Right.
but yeah, it's profound. But basically, it's I guess I should say too, I'm not like formally trained in IFS, so I sort of talk about it in my own way, and but I think it's basically just, and this can bring up things for people too, like warmth, curiosity is a big one I'll use, interest, bigger than, around.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of my IFS teachers, Derek Scott in Canada, used an analogy. Probably other IFS people use this analogy that I liked. It's like, I mean, it's the analogy is that is like, the sun and clouds, and that IFS is a little bit of a model of he calls it a model of subtraction, where we got a lot of parts running around when we're blended or identified with, or with a lot of these parts who are in distress or whatnot. Then we're going to have less access to a felt sense of those C words: compassion, curiosity, calm, confidence. I forget all of them. That quality gets lessened if we're kind of more in our in stress physiology, and our parts are not. But that unblending concept, the idea of seeing a part, slowing down, developing a relation, not being the part, but developing a relationship to it, from working to view it from the perspective of self energy. And then now there's more of that quality that's, in the, in one's experience. And to me, like, there's philosophical implications, which are great. And I'm into that because, as we both are. And there's also super practical implications. It's sort of like, hey, forget about, like, the theory. It's just, it works. And to me, it's such a transformative, but also a self-empowering, and also like a loving way to work with the things that are challenging in ourselves. Exactly. So, yeah.
Well said.
Thank you. Yeah. What, Yeah, it's funny because capital S self, and I know Carl Jung used that term, and it may be a somewhat similar way. And then
Mm,
in Buddhism, often at least in Zen, and often talk about no self, and
mm.
I think a lot of it is semantics. Personally, I mean, there's
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
some
yeah,
important philosophical distinctions, sort of,
yeah, yeah.
but it's also kind of more semantic. Like,
Right.
what's your how do you kind of, as a, I don't know if you identify as Buddhist, but you certainly have
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
Buddhist meditation background. How do you connect that to self from an IFS perspective?
yeah. Well, I always resonated more like Jack Kornfield put it, like, is it no self or true self? Of like,
Uh huh.
what's helping a person to understand something more profound about who they are? I'm not somebody who's like
Mm,
realized in the Buddhist sense, or I've had direct experience of what's
mm,
beyond, but I think
mm,
about it that way, and in the later traditions of like Tathagata Garbha, like Buddha nature, that like you're not, and it's it becomes a mess of words when you get to that level. But the like you're
mm,
describing, even at a in a pragmatic day-to-day way of like, or in cognitive therapy, like the releasing of cognitive fusion, of like some space, like warmth, like these are elements of it, right? Actually,
mm.
Mingyur Rinpoche's got a great way of talking about experiencing the moon as like experiencing self. Of like, uh, you can hear about it. You can also like read about it and become familiar with it. You can see a reflection of it.
Mm-hmm.
You can see a
Mm-hmm.
sliver of it, and then you can like, of course, see the entire moon. And there's all these different ways of like getting in contact with self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think I like that as an analogy, the one you just gave, and to me, I think it applies well in that practical journey of IFS, because I actually really like, some people say self. Derek Scott he really leans into the term self energy more than self,
uh-huh.
and the reason I like that is because it kind of conveys this idea of it's a continuum. It's not just like an on-off switch, like you're blended with a part, or
Yes,
you're
exactly.
one with the entire universe.
Right,
That
exactly.
it's not such a jump like that necessarily. Um, that self energy is present, and it shows up in ways, and sometimes in familiar ways, with a slowing down and pausing, and suddenly now there's more self compassion, or there's more
Yes, exactly.
awareness or insight, and there's body states so it's quite so that's sort of like one, a level of it, and
Yeah,
and and then there may be deeper levels of it, is even in the therapeutic context, or certainly in retreat. If
yeah, yeah,
there can certainly be kind of a deepening and expanding as to what is that. but
yeah,
but I, but I I'm a believer in this idea that we don't need to be super black and white about it.
yeah.
I don't know,
And
just
maybe I'm even being too heady about it, because basically what it's just like, are you feeling your own self, and is it characterized by empathy and warmth and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
spaciousness? Yeah.
Yeah, well, and there's that, what's called, I forget, one of my teachers, that diagnostic question
Uh-huh.
in IFS, the diagnostic question of, and how are you feeling towards that part?
Yes, exactly.
It's like a test
Totally.
uh, of, how much self energy is there, because if you're feeling pissed off at that part, that
Right.
might be totally valid, but that's a pissed off part.
Yeah.
It's not really imbued with
Yes.
a ton of
Yes.
self energy yet.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yes, and what I like about that too is it sort of takes it. I was kind of talking about things in the extraordinary way, and that makes it
uh-huh,
just very ordinary and plain. Of like, how are you feeling towards your experience? Like, it's very
right,
straightforward, um,
yep,
and it's important to have work there. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly. Um, Super great. Well, this is a slight curveball. I mentioned at the beginning, but I don't know very much about your artistic background, but I'm curious about it.
sure.
Has that been a lifelong thing? And and does it connect to any of the things we've talked about, or what's,
Ah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it actually has been a lifelong thing, and more or less since being a kid, again, like growing up in Santa Fe, it's around, and there were some
Yeah.
important mentors for that and an important community around it. Excuse me. And what would I say? How does it fit in? Well, it certainly fits in on the level of expression and developing a relationship with inner criticism and inhibition and how that functions in image making and beauty. And that's the way I think about self too, is like how it shows up in art with resonance, So for me, it was like, there was a period of time leading up to, while living in San Francisco, my experience of some of the art community there was critical, and it just started to become like tight, and it's like I didn't want to do it, I was like pretty judgmental, and then it shifted to I guess I made kind of a conscious shift of like, what does pattern formation look like, and how, like, what does it look like to have a relationship with my own mind where I'm tabling inhibiting processes and just letting something unfold, like in my own art practice. And that was really a major shift for me. Like, how do I be more free in this, and what's grounding, and trusting that like things will show up. So many people, you talk to them and it's like, well, I can't make art. I don't make art. I'm not good at drawing, or I'm not good at, and it's like, it's really, it's a block.
I'm one of those people. Yeah. That's my story.
You can make a practice out of that. Yeah. If you want.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'll get some tips on that. Yeah.
So it's been really helpful for me. And in so many ways. Yeah.
And I think, is it different medium? Like I know I've seen prints. I think I might've seen sculpture or ceramic. What are you drawn to a multiple kinds of expressions, or?
Yeah, I do some prints. I do some, I grew up drawing and painting, and I like to incorporate the two, do mixed media stuff. And then some sculptures lately. I've been making pieces of cake out of wood and painting them, and just random,
Awesome. Oh, super
stuff.
cool.
Yeah.
Can we, is there, do you show your pieces? Do you sell your pieces? Is there a link we can include in the show?
Sure. I haven't been making a ton lately. I'm going to get back to it once I finish this house project, but my Instagram is at Coogie Devin, COOGIDEVIN.
We'll put it in there.
I don't have a website for that. Thanks, man.
Okay. Instagram. Hey, Mo, that's a good way to see it. Yeah.
I don't have a website yet, that kind of thing. But
yeah,
I have sold stuff in the past, and it ebbs and flows for me, and I'm due for a flow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Flows are good. That's, blue and red.
That's exactly right.
Super cool. Well, Devin, this was fun for me. We've informally had these kinds of conversations a few times, but I feel like we got into some stuff I didn't know about some of your journeys, and I just really appreciate you taking time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's always good to talk with you. So
awesome. Great.
And thanks again for just what you've done for the community, and continue to do. It's important and good, so.
I will take that in. I appreciate the appreciation. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.